The Champlain Housing Trust is one of 250 CLTs in the USA. It is not unique, but it does have the distinction of being one of the oldest CLTs at the ripe old age of 34. It is also among the largest CLTs, despite being founded in a small city of 42,000 people in one of the smallest, most rural states in the US, Vermont. It also has the distinction of being the first CLT that was started by a city government. It was incorporated separately from that government, an NGO not controlled by the city, but city officials were instrumental in initiating the CLT's formation and then funding both its operations and its projects in the early years. What was the impetus? Why did the city take this unusual step of sponsoring a new CLT? In the early 1980s, in Burlington and in cities and suburbs across the U.S., the gap between average family income and the average price of buying a home was widening. Homeownership, a mainstay of the American dream, was moving rapidly beyond the reach of working class families and middle class families. At the same time, Ronald Reagan had been elected president in 1981 and begun an 8-year slash and burn regime of reducing the federal funds that cities and states had previously used to close the affordability gap and to subsidize housing that people of modest incomes could afford to buy or to rent. A small city like Burlington was hit especially hard by these cutbacks. At the same time, our public housing authority was a mess, what I believe you would call council housing or social housing in Australia. And our housing market was hot, with prices being pushed up by the expansion of major institutions like the University of Vermont and a major medical center. Amidst this turmoil, we elected an activist mayor by the name of Bernie Sanders, who is looking for new ways to stop the displacement of working class people from neighborhoods adjacent to our central business district, and looking for new ways to address the city's housing problem. In particular, he wanted to find ways to serve people in what I later called the missing middle. That is, people neither at the top or at the bottom of the income scale. The latter, in particular, would be served by fixing our public housing authority. At the same time, Bernie wanted to help working class people to have a shot at home ownership. So he and his administration, in which I later became a member, serving as the city's housing director, began exploring ways to provide home ownership for the missing middle. We looked at several options, settling on the Community Land Trust. The Burlington Community Land Trust was incorporated in 1984, adopting all the features of what I earlier described as the classic CLT. The one variation in that classic model was introduced later as we expanded our service area. We now reserve a third of the seats on the board of directors for city and county officials from Burlington and surrounding towns, but our members still elect the other 2/3, a clear majority of the seats on our board. Today we have about 6,000 members, roughly half of which live in the CLT's homes and half who do not. We adopted the CLT model not only because we wanted to bring homeownership within the reach of working class families, but also because we didn't want to lose those homes, homes that we had worked so hard to subsidize with scarce public dollars. The market was hot, so we didn't want to lose affordability when those homes resold. But we also anticipated that the market might someday turn cold, as it did during the Great Recession of 2008. So we wanted to prevent both deferred maintenance and foreclosures during downturns in the boom and bust economy. The CLT became a vehicle for implementing what Community Land Trust across the United States refer to as the three faces of stewardship. So in 1984, with a seed grant from the city of Burlington, we hired one employee and managed to acquire, rehabilitate, and resell one house, bought by a single mother with 2 children. Flash forward to the present, to 2018. Our CLT now has over 2,800 homes in its portfolio. We also own a number of buildings that provide non-residential space for social service agencies, neighborhood shops, daycare, and arts programs for youth and adults. We are an expansionist CLT, doing more development every year, bringing more homes and facilities into our portfolio. We've actually grown to be a fairly big operation with a rather large staff. Quite a change from that single employee we hired back in 1984. In 2006, we changed the name of the Burlington Community Land Trust to the Champlain Housing Trust after merging with another nonprofit developer of rental housing. And over time, we expanded our service area so that today we serve a 3-county region, although a majority of our holdings of land and buildings are still concentrated inside the city limit of Burlington. Now, much of this growth and development was well planned and quite intentional. But a key part of who we became and what we do as a CLT was serendipitous. Remember our mission of serving the missing middle? Over time, that mission evolved as we attempted to serve people who could not afford to purchase single-family detached houses. So there was a gradual shift in our focus, pulling us in a new direction. We still produce detached single-family houses, either newly built or acquired, rehabilitated, and resold. But we also developed attached duplexes, and we developed condominiums, what I believe they call strata in England. We have developed limited equity cooperatives on CHT's land, now containing over 100 cooperative apartments. We have nearly 2,000 units of rental housing in our portfolio, along with a number of buildings with commercial space on the first floor and residential units on the upper floors. And we have added a number of buildings that provide shelter or temporary housing for individuals and families who are homeless. For each of these ventures into a new type or tenure of housing, serving populations that were lower and lower down the income ladder, we were committed to making sure that residents were secure and successful, no matter which form of CHT housing they occupied. We were intent on using our stewardship regime to preserve affordability, preserve quality, and above all, to protect security of tenure for the occupants. But here's where life happened while we were making other plans. Because as our portfolio grew and diversified, we noticed that people were moving from one form of CHT housing to another as their circumstances changed. Without planning for it, we discovered that we were not only in the business of housing security, but we were in the mobility business as well. Indeed, we talked more and more about having created, serendipitously, a housing tenure ladder where people could move easily from one rung to another while still remaining within CHT's realm of permanent affordability and watchful stewardship. But families also transitioned out of CHT. Having reached the top rungs of our housing tenure ladder, they sold their limited equity condominiums, duplex units, or their house and used the equity they had built up during their time as a CHT homeowner to leap into the market, buying a market-priced house with no resale restrictions. About 2/3 of our homeowners make this leap into the market when they resell a CHT home. But we also discovered that a number of our renters and homeowners do not follow such a neat, sequential, step-by-step progression. They sometimes jump over rungs. So even more unplanned and unexpected to us, we began to see that families sometimes move in the other direction, either by choice or by force of circumstances. So these days we talk less about CHT's system of housing mobility as a ladder, where some forms of tenure are inherently superior or inferior to others. Instead, we describe our system as a wheel, where families sometimes move one way and sometimes move the other. It's a choice enhancing system that combines security and mobility, reflecting the changes in a family's life cycle or economic situation. This dynamic approach to affordable housing development and stewardship was one of the reasons that the Champlain Housing Trust won a World Habitat Award in 2008. As a result of winning that award, we were then asked to host an international group of practitioners and scholars from a dozen different countries who came to Burlington in June 2009 to see what this community land trust model was all about. And who arrived as a member of that delegation? None other than Louise Crabtree, the person who had hosted me in Sydney 4 months before. She traveled to Burlington again in 2012, so she has a pretty clear idea of what CHT has done well and what we have done less well. In fact, we have made many mistakes along the way, along with our many successes. So, as Louise will no doubt tell you, don't try to imitate or replicate CHT exactly. Take the CLT model that we have used and adapt it to fit your own circumstances and needs. Make it your own. Do it your own way. Best of luck to you all.